There we go. Episode 1 of the Guru Killer podcast. Let's go.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 1 of the Guru Killer podcast with your host, me, Cameron Shayne.
And me, Mark Barato.
No, not accurate. We've got a new host in the house, guys. Donato Helbling.
Thank you for having me, Coach.
Hey, let me tell the story about how we got you. So first of all, guys, for those who listen to the podcast, I'm going to keep this brief, but Mark Barato moved down to the Keys. He basically wanted to go to Mosquito Land. He got old, and then he wanted to retire.
He said he wanted to be a pirate, I
and
believe.
basically, and he wanted to drink a lot and have cats. He wanted to be kind of that Hemingway lifestyle. So Mark ended up with the family moving down there. Obviously we're messing with Mark. He's got a killer lifestyle down there. He's super happy. He wanted to get out of Miami. Don't blame him. Escape while you can. And he's down there. And so Donato, who is young and still resistant to your basic mosquito-borne viruses like Zika, is still here. And so I was able to, wrangle him into being my co-host. A little background on Donato. Donato is one of my earliest students and my first black belt in him, and along with Joe Ensign, who is a good friend of ours who lives in the mountains of North Carolina. Donato is one of the oldest, earliest Budokon black belts in the system, and he's been working with me probably longer than anybody in the work that we do in regard to mind science, which we call mind science and movement science. And so he's joining us, and he's going to be here with us from now on. It's going to be him and I hosting this podcast together.
I am honored, Concho, really. When you asked me to do it, well, I still don't know what to expect.
Good,
So.
and that's enough out of you. Okay, excellent. No, so moving on to our topic for the day, guys. Today we're going to be discussing empathy. Empathy is a really interesting conversation. I was actually inspired to discuss empathy today because I was listening to a really interesting NPR podcast, and the conversation was about empathy, and there were a couple of really fascinating points that were brought up during the podcast that really concerned me, and they made me want to have a deeper discussion around what empathy is, what has changed in our society in regard to empathy, and how empathy ultimately has to be a value for a society that wants to succeed. And let me start off by saying, let's start off by answering the question, what is empathy?
Yeah, what's that?
So, what is that thing?
Well, especially because we have a lot of listeners that are not
Empathetic? Exactly. A lot of you guys out there just don't give a shit. And I want to start with you.
Yeah, but what's empathy? I mean, let's set up the stage for the whole discussion.
Okay. So empathy is your ability to basically see the world through another person's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very simple version of empathy. It's to meet a stranger and take a moment and see things from their perspective, walk in their shoes, as we used to say in my generation. It would be, hey, don't judge a man until you've walked in his shoes. That was a very old, sort of classic, empathetic, call to empathy, an empathetic statement. Okay. And these days, and I believe this is the result of social media and the change in the climate, the social climate. The change is that people are less empathetic. And that's not just, because I know you guys out there are probably feeling like, yeah, man, people feel a little less empathetic. Well, you're not crazy. There's actually science behind this now, and people are actually, and prepare yourself for this, I guess it's a statistic. It's okay. Scientific evidence.
How much less empathetic are we now?
Okay, we are according to the statistics, and this is how they've come to these conclusions. They've been asking a series of questions to different generations since the 60s. And the way that each individual answers those questions is measured, and you sort of get a feel for how empathetic they are. And one of those questions, as an example, is before you sort of reach a conclusion about a situation, do you consider all possible sides?
You're asking me? I don't.
No, exactly. I know you don't. That's what makes you very effective in the world of, high finance. That's why you're able to just, you're able to Bernie Madoff people in an instant. Did I even get that name right? Bernie Madoff? Madoff? Whatever. Okay. Not the point, guys. Bringing you back. So people are 40%. This is the number I'm wanting you to prepare yourself for. People are literally right now 40% less empathetic than they were in 2009. Based on this series of questions.
2009?
2009.
Oh.
So since 2009.
Okay.
According
so the last decade.
Yeah. Yes. People are literally 40% less empathetic than they were in the past 10 to 15 years. So, and again, they arrived at this by simply asking the same exact questions they've been asking for the past 4 or 5 decades. And people just literally have become less and less willing and interested in taking on another person's perspective. In other words, why do I need to feel bad about this guy or for this guy? Or why do I need to try on the fact that this guy had a hard childhood and then that's the reason he's a murderer? That's the reason he's a rapist. That's the reason he's a child molester. Why do I need to try to understand where he comes from when it's just so much easier to just simply hate him? Right. Because I don't have time, and this is my theory. Okay. I don't have time for empathy. Empathy costs time. What it requires us to do is stop, use our imagination, to think, to ponder, to be philosophical in some way, shape, or form, which we just don't have time for anymore.
What about being willing to not be right?
And also being willing to not be right.
Because if I stop to listen, to imagine how you may feel, I may realize that I'm the asshole.
Right. What a terrible place to arrive to. That, oh shit, my intuition or my internal compass doesn't work very well either. I'm not as accurate as I think I am about when I judge situations and people, places, and things.
Yeah, you might just rather be right.
It's so much. Well, what's beautiful about being right is that I'm always right. That's a fantastic safety net about being right. Is that I can just, it's an echo chamber. I say something and then I say inside my head, that was absolutely right. You are completely right. So the question is, how does being less empathetic affect you guys out there listening? How does it affect you as a boss, you as a parent, you as a student, you as a teacher, you as a citizen? What is changing when our culture is literally 40%, almost half less empathetic than it was
10 years ago?
10 years ago.
Because
10 to 15. 10 to 15.
20 years ago, maybe we're 70% less empathetic.
Right. And the idea was, what was interesting about the podcast is they were talking about the fact that, and this is cognitive psychology that was sort of investigating empathy. And empathy was a concept, like all things are. I mean, all things are concepts. Love's a concept. Hate's a concept. Forgiveness is a concept. But empathy is also a concept. Yes. And the concept of empathy is, again, me trying on your position before reaching a conclusion from my side. Why it became popular to be empathetic was that there was a time when the war seemed like it was going to go, or the world seemed like it was going to go into a third world war. We were at very at very strong odds. We were very polarized during the 70s and 80s with communism,
Cold War,
the Cold War, the Russians, the whole thing. And it was like, if we don't start trying on other people's positions, if we don't imagine ourselves as a Russian, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to all end up killing ourselves with nuclear weapons, and we're going to end up destroying the planet because no one can actually see the other person's position. And it's just like, I'm in an echo chamber over here. We're all right. And those guys over there are these barbaric, terrible human beings that are trying to take away our personal freedoms and our values. And then those guys over there are saying the same thing about us. So what happened was the social scientists started pushing the idea of empathy. They started pushing it into the sort of cultural conversation.
Right, and it probably became a field of interest, of study for these scientists.
Right on. It started getting, and even when I was a young person in school, we would write letters like to some kid over in Russia and try to send. You had pen pals across the world. You were literally trying to relate to other people that were not Americans. And so empathy
with good intentions.
With good intentions, because the idea was we really need to be more empathetic as a society and as a people. So we began to push that, and it was an important. I think it's a very important part of social consciousness is to be actively empathetic. Because guys, if we're not actively empathetic, how do we, let me take something simple like you're the boss of an individual. How do we manage people if we're not empathetic to their salary, to their socioeconomic conditions, to their education? Let me give you an example. You own a company and you hire an employee. The employee makes $12 an hour.
Right.
Maybe they make 15. They're rich. Okay, obviously that's comedy, because we all know that $12, $15 an hour doesn't get you much. So you've got this employee that makes $12 to $15 an hour, and they're not working hard enough for you. You want them to have the same work ethic you have. So you show up and you're like, hey, why aren't you grinding? Where are you at? Why aren't you putting forth this effort? Does it occur to you that this employee makes $12 to $15 an hour? And does it also occur to you they don't own your business?
Right, they don't care.
So there are two factors that are really important here that are being that are blind spots, that are being completely overlooked by that individual, which might be you I'm talking to out there, which is that you've got an individual here making $12 an hour, and you can't see from a position of empathy. You don't have empathetic, I'm trying to find the right way to phrase this, but you don't have an empathetic perspective when you're evaluating this individual's performance and this individual's dedication to the business. You're never going to get a person who does not own part of your company to work as hard as you, ever. You're never going to get a person who makes $12 to $15 an hour to care as much as you care about something they don't own. And if they do, they're such a fucking anomaly. They're just in,
you can't build a business on people like that.
Because they're too rare. Exactly. And if they do show up, then of course you make that person a partner. You figure out how to
retain that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. But the reality is they're so rare that most of the time you're gonna have to spend your time being empathetic to your employees, because you have to understand that you are a stepping stone for them, like someone was a stepping stone for you on the way towards something bigger, something more sustainable. Because $12 an hour is just not sustainable unless you have somebody working for you that lives in the poorest part of town, has very, very low rent, maybe lives with 6 people in a house. You know what I mean? These are the conditions in which you can pay people these really low wages and expect them to work their ass off, because they have such low overhead, because their overhead is only reflective of the socioeconomic conditions they must be living in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is something that I think is crucial for us to consider.
I like the part that you brought up earlier, where you said that this was somehow a value that it was almost agreed upon by society, and it was kind of injected into the cultural fabric of the country.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, okay, let's have the kids write to the pen pals. Somehow we decided that empathy was a value that we wanted to adopt, and all of a sudden the education system got on board.
True.
We all started to participate in it. I wonder what it is that happened that empathy stopped being a value that we share as a culture, as a community.
Well, what's interesting is so did physical education. I mean, you could ask the same question. When did we stop requiring people to play?
Or to have breaks.
To exercise and have breaks in school, like as a genuine part of their curriculum.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, so for me, the same thing happens with empathy. It just becomes overshadowed by whatever's culturally significant at that moment. And for us, I think what's culturally significant is, for the typical person, for my 16-year-old daughter as an example, the things that are culturally significant are being popular, being famous, getting rich quick, having the next big toy, the next piece of technology, having, constantly in a state of getting, consuming. Thank you. That I think those are our cultural values. That's what our artists are singing about. That's what our pop culture, influencers are talking about. That's what you see out there. And so when that's the focal point, then it's going to find its way into the education system somehow. Yep. So, we're not talking about empathy, because empathy, who gives a fuck about empathy anymore when it's all about me getting what me needs?
Right.
Now I got to get mine.
Right.
Because I got to, hey, I can't worry about you. I got to get mine. And
it's kind of like every man for himself.
Well, it is. And you know what? I understand that to a certain degree. What I understand is I've got to get mine. I do understand that.
Right.
I think you understand that.
Yeah.
You do have to get yours.
There's got to be a boundary in which you maintain yourself sustainable before you take care of everybody else.
Absolutely. Right. But where's the boundary of getting what is yours? And then what is mine? And then what is yours that I'm making mine? Because this becomes the real question.
Yeah. I think that it becomes very I think it becomes a lot more toxic and a lot more destructive when you look at the opposite of empathy, which is the result of not having empathy is inevitably intolerance.
Right.
Right. Because I never consider what you must be going through.
Right.
So I'm just going to make my decision and I don't care what happens to you. So like the example that you were given, the boss that comes down and rips a new hole into the employees because they don't care as much as he does.
Right, they're not
his business.
Right, they're not working extra hours.
Yeah, it's okay. Why are you going to bed? Why are you going home so early?
Right, forgetting this guy's like literally making again $12 an hour, and he's like,
it doesn't get paid overtime,
and has no skin in the game. He's like, why am I here?
I'm doing what I said I was going to do.
Yeah, dude, I told you I show up 8 hours, and
here I am.
I show up, I sell tacos, and I go home. I mean, you know what I mean? But
what if the guy fires him for not caring? It's like, oh, you don't care. You're not the right person. Just you're fired. Well, that's intolerance, right?
It is intolerance, and we're in the age of intolerance.
Yes.
And this is sort of what brings this conversation full circle. Is not only are our artists and our pop culture influencers reflecting this, our president's reflecting it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will push back on this statement. It's like, oh man, here we go. You're going to politics, or you're pushing back against the president. I'm like, look, honestly, first of all, personally, I have no political preferences in terms of parties, and that was 3 Ps. No preferences for parties in politics. Okay, I don't give a rat's ass about the Republicans or the Democrats or who. I just care about great leadership.
Right.
And being bipartisan is something that's not interesting to me at all.
Right.
These guys have to, the only, matter of fact, I think it's probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to the political, structure is to have two-party system.
Yeah,
it's
what's really
absurd.
interesting is that if we look at a lot of the values that you talk about, you're technically a Republican.
Well, exactly.
Right?
What people would be shocked about is how conservative I am.
Yep.
And how liberal I am at the same time.
At the same time.
I'm very confusing for people.
You're like marry whoever you want and have your guns.
Dude, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't care who you sleep with and who you identify as, and then you can carry your own guns and make sure if you want to have abortion, that's up to you. It's like these are all, but because
and, keep the government off my back.
Well, and I don't exactly.
And don't tax me.
Yeah, and also provide free health care and education for everyone.
Excellent.
So I'm a very confusing individual. Because
who isn't? Unless you're one of these extremist one or the other teams, then you're confusing.
Exactly.
I don't think that's fair. And without running the risk of getting too political, but we'll never get political because we're not talking about those two parties ever.
Well, we're talking about empathy and how it's expressed within politics.
Right. It's this thing where I believe that right now it's more popular. And look, man, I grew up in South America. So I grew up, with the novela in the background. There's something very...
I feel like ICE is going to knock on the door any moment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. I'm not getting paid for this.
Yeah.
I'm here legally.
Why are you in the... No, I'm sorry. Yes.
So, man, there's a very basic or primal appeal in the human psyche for the argument and the drama, right? And the novellas pivot on that. There's a little bit of love, but mostly drama. And people are always glued to that freaking thing. Why? And when you look at politics, they're also just another novela. They're another soap opera that we're watching. We don't even know. We think they're in love,
yes,
but they really hate each other. Yeah. We always hope that they're going to get along, but they're always fighting.
Well, it's a dangerous echo chamber as well, because what you do is you get caught inside your feedback loop, which is the same information.
Right.
And so now, I'm on this side and you're on that side.
Yeah.
And we know that social media is purposefully targeting Democrats with Democratic perspectives. And it's targeting Republicans with Republican perspectives, because it knows that you, as a Democrat, want to see this information. And so it's going to feed it to you all day long.
Yeah, and it's going to keep you watching.
And so for you to actually hear anything that's counter perspective, which would give you, again, some empathy, or really, maybe not give you, but force you to try on empathy.
It'll show you another perspective, and
right,
maybe your brain will pick it up and be like, what about that?
Yeah, wow, that's an interesting, I didn't consider that particular point of view. Right. It's very easy. Like a great example, guys. When it comes to immigration, now, first of all, you guys know I live in Miami. And so basically I live in South America, in America, because we have the typical, white American in Miami is a very small minority. So most of my friends, most of my students, most of my coworkers, they are all in some way, shape, or form from Latin America.
Yes.
What is fascinating to me is how, and of course I travel in South America. Mm-hmm. My wife is South American. She's Brazilian.
Until the government asks, then she's German.
Until the government, she's German. She has 2 passports. So what's interesting is I travel throughout different South American countries. I experience the cultures. I experience the poverty. I experience the wealth. I experience the culture, and I understand from a vantage point that a lot of Americans don't, because many Americans do not even have a passport.
Which means they're not legally allowed to leave the country.
Absolutely. I've been traveling for years and years and years on almost a monthly basis around the world. My perspective is not normal for the typical American.
Exactly.
And you have to have, first of all, you have to have empathy for that and understand that the typical American lives in a small town in America and they don't understand what it looks like in another culture, in another country.
So all they know
is
what's good, what they hear.
What they hear, what they see, what they're exposed to on a daily basis, okay?
Right.
Now, my position on immigration, however, is that not everyone can just simply come into the country.
Fair.
And a lot of people would think, wow, for a liberal guy who has a lot of friends who have migrated to America, including my wife, that seems awfully Republican. I'm not Republican in the sense that I'm about shutting down immigration, but the reality is you can simply not just have people without any control, without any infrastructure in place for it, flood into any area. And I mean that by this. You can't have all the people in Miami just decide to flood into Orlando either. It will not work. No. And you will destroy infrastructure. I mean,
it happens when there's a hurricane.
Well,
we all just go to Orlando and we pack everything, and trash everything.
Correct. Which is exactly what happens during, say, the Ultra Festival in Miami when
Art Basel,
I don't know how many, it's something. It's a very extreme number. Come into Miami, they wreck the beaches. They wreck the landscape because they're tourists and they don't give a shit. They don't live here, so they just get to dump on it and leave it behind.
Right.
So my position on immigration is that if you're going to do it, you got to do it in an orderly, organized manner. Yeah. And I know that's difficult, but that's how you did it. That's how Guy did it. That's how Malaine did it. Yeah. That's how everybody that I know, for the most part has done it. Because if you don't do it that way, what you do is you create an environment that no one even wants to migrate to. Because it becomes, basically a disaster zone. So, and I know that's an exaggeration, but my point being this: when you move around from country to country, there's nothing wrong with that. Migration is totally normal. It's totally how we got where we are in the world, and it's totally acceptable. Not only acceptable, it should be welcomed, and it's beautiful. But it can't be done by storming the gates.
Right.
You cannot just storm the walls of a place and demand to come inside it.
Right, and expect to be
and
allowed.
Expect. You just can't. And because no one should do that to anyone going in either direction of this conversation. So that would be considered a conservative view, maybe when really, but here, coming back to empathy, I have empathy for these children that are in Syria that are not getting to eat because these douchebag adults can't work their shit out and would be so, just horrific. And so, I have no words for what these adult males, and it's mostly adult males, are doing to these humans in the pursuit of so-called peace. Because this is what everybody will tell you on either side. We just want peace.
Yeah.
We want peace by controlling those people, and then we'll have peace.
Right.
That's what we want. We just want peace too.
That's like having sex for virginity.
That's it. We just want some virginity. We're gonna have sex for it. We're gonna make it happen. And it's like, so what they want is they want peace, because if you talk to the leadership,
I'm sure they'll sell you the peace.
They're gonna sell you that they're trying to create stability, but through their ideology. And the empathy there is that they have no empathy for the other individuals' culture and perspectives. And so I'm just saying, what's happening right now is we are losing empathy even in the sectors of immigration, because the people who are saying, fuck the immigrants, they cannot come in. I don't care. That's their problem. Let them work it out. It's their country. Like these children they're fucked. These kids, they didn't choose this. But you know, if you don't think I wouldn't scoop up a little kid who was starving and fucking bring him back with me, I would. I'm not going to watch a little kid starve. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go, hey, you know what, man? This is, but
it's their shit.
Well, it's their shit. However, on the other side of that, the immigrants who travel across in hordes and try to storm the border, they don't have empathy for how a system has to run. And again, you've got to see this. Empathy requires you to look at both positions. You can't just storm a place and just go in and occupy it because you believe that you have the right to do that because you're suffering. And I understand that's a super shit position. But the reality is, it's still, you have to have empathy for both sides of the position to understand how to find a balanced middle. So you can't just storm a place because you believe you're entitled to, and you can't just keep people out because you believe you're entitled to completely, secluding, the world from sharing in your wealth and your stability and your opportunities. It's a conversation.
Well, I think it may be a little unfair for us to sit here and assume we understand why they do it or what the reasoning behind it is.
I don't.
Right? Like,
no, yeah.
because they think that they are entitled to come in.
Well,
but I don't know if they are. Maybe they just seen that people do go in, so they rather try than stay.
Okay, this is true.
I don't know if it's because they're like, I should be allowed.
Okay.
Maybe they're like, I know I'm not allowed, but I'm going to fucking try anyways.
That's fair. That's fair. And what I think, to your point, I think there's a bit of entitlement. And what I mean by that is, I know, because I've been told this, that I'm not welcome, or I'm not legally going to be accepted. But I also have been told that there are loopholes to that law that say if I am a refugee, if I'm coming from a war-torn country, that I am entitled to certain privileges.
Right.
And so I'm going to push that.
I'm going to write that thing.
I'm going to write that till the wheels fall off, because I do believe I'm entitled to take advantage of that particular, I'm not going to call it a loophole. These are provisions. It's something like the Geneva Convention. I forget the name of these particular. I don't want to call it a law because I'm not sure that that's the accurate.
No, but there's definitely provisions.
It's at least a provision. So I believe I have to imagine, and again, I'll be fair to say I'm imagining, at least I make up, that the immigration population that does come across the border, knowing that it's going to be met with resistance, feels that it is entitled to take advantage of that provision. Now, don't get me wrong. Is it coming from something worse? Yes. And that's the logic and the empathy behind that. Hey, man, look at this guy and tell him that what's worse is dealing with Border Patrol in the U.S. or with a fascist fucking regime that's killing
or
their children,
cutting your head off.
Yeah, cutting your head off. So I mean, what's your worst case scenario?
I don't even know if it's an entitlement or maybe it's the possibility. It's like, you know what? I know I don't deserve it, but I may get it.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Like, it's like, you know how many people like collect unemployment don't really deserve it. They're like, well, fuck it. I mean, if I can get it, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
Right. So.
Now, and again, I'm not saying that these people are those people either. I mean, if I'm going across a river with my 5-year-old to make a better life for them, I'm not saying I'm that guy who's eating off the system because I can. I'm not saying that at all. And I know you're not saying that, but
the thing is that right now I feel like the conversation gets polarized because all of a sudden everyone that's an immigrant is that. which is not the case.
Well, and this becomes where we start destroying empathy.
Empathy, exactly, because empathy
It requires
requires time, it requires energy, it requires the willingness to be wrong.
reflection,
It requires
intelligence,
you to have to change, right?
emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and it also requires independent and individual thought.
Right.
Instead of being told what you think.
Yeah, you can't be one of the mass.
Well, not of the mass that right now is trying to be. I think that the mass that we as a society, because I like to say that they're trying to build. We're all part of it. The society that we're breeding right now.
Yeah, and I like where you're going with this. With what does empathy develop in us? It develops a certain emotional intelligence, or at least a part of what makes emotional intelligence. In the sense that it requires us to, before we emotionally react, that we take on the other person's perspective.
That we consider it seriously.
That we truly do consider. And this makes us better fucking human beings. That's my argument.
Even if you're still right.
Absolutely, exactly.
Even if you're still
Even
right,
if
the
you're
fact
right,
that you stop
that you
to think
did it.
about it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's I mean, what an advanced way to, quote unquote, win an argument, right? Like to display complete understanding of the other side's take and still be right.
Well, and in being right, let me flesh that out. In still holding your position,
Yes.
I've genuinely considered your position. I genuinely hear you. I genuinely see you have a very fair and fine point.
Right.
And yet, what is necessary to accomplish this particular task is this, and I have to stick to it.
Yeah.
So for me, as empathetic as I can be, I'm going to put this into action through a statement. As empathetic as I can be for every immigrant out there who is running from some horror and some difficult place. Yeah. Everybody cannot just go to one place. Right. And I don't care if it's Germany or Switzerland or America. It doesn't, you know what I'm saying? This isn't about me being patriotic. You can't go to one place in that manner, because if you do, you destroy what you're going towards. Because it can't, if it was built that way or existed that way, it wouldn't be the same place you would want to even go to. So what we have to do is, listen, man, here's a reality. We're overpopulated. There's too many humans on the planet. And it's never going to be fair. There's no fairness. And anybody who believes in fairness. And again, there's a certain amount of fairness fairness is its own conversation because it's an entitlement construct. There is no such thing as fair in the universe in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's a human construct.
It's a human construct, as all things are. But
like
it's
justice.
Exactly.
Like justice,
but it's
the
really
absolutely enforcement of fairness.
You're looking for fairness in your life, my friends out there. You can just kiss that fairy tale goodbye. There is no fairness. You'll never be treated fairly. You'll be treated in accordance with either the way you behave or what the other person feels like treating you like that day, or what they are somehow beholden to. In other words, you would think you would receive fair treatment from police, but let's be honest, what you're going to get that day
depends on a lot of things.
Depends on how that police officer woke up that morning, what they dealt with their family, what they're personally going through, what you look like, how you treat them, there's so many things that are factored into being treated fairly that it's impossible to come up with a consistent and agreed upon rule for fairness. It just doesn't exist.
It's
absurd.
You know.
So grow up, kids. That's just not going to happen.
I mean, as a society, we try with the legal system and with
we do
the
our
judicial
best.
system, and we know it doesn't work.
No, we do our best. And what I liked about Carl Jung's statement was the pendulum of I believe the quote is the pendulum of reality, or it doesn't swing between right and wrong. It swings between nonsense and sense. And I believe it's not even the pendulum of reality. The pendulum of, it might be justice. I'll have to look that up, but I think you guys are getting my general point, which is that this thing in life that's swinging, right and left, it's not swinging between the point of right and wrong. It's swinging between the point of sense and nonsense. It's swinging between the point of necessary and unnecessary. It's swinging between this thing that keeps the universe balanced, which is excess and not enough, too much and not enough.
Yeah. Natural and forced.
That's it.
Right.
And as soon as it swings one way, it's got to swing back the other. So human population is the same issue. You're going to swing this thing so far, and we're going to get so overpopulated on this planet because everybody's got the right to breed. And as an animal, and we are an animal, and everybody feels entitled to reproduce with no restrictions.
Right.
At what point does that pendulum swing back the other way to where nature says, are you fucking out of your mind? You just can't make as many of you as you want to.
Let me show you.
Let me show you. And it's going to. It's going
Eventually it's going to cost
Absolutely.
us.
It's going to. But it's what I'm saying is it's costing us now.
But we don't see it.
We don't see it because as we all know, and you know this from reading any really nice primatology study like Franz de Waal's work, or read Sapiens. We're not supposed to be in clusters this large.
No.
We're 150 deep. That's as big as a tribe goes for.
Well, hold on. I have 7,000 friends in Facebook.
Well, exactly, and that in itself could possibly be, could be a red flag. So it's like the fact that we are going that far, that we're trying to expand our social network that far, is deteriorating and eroding at what society and social relationship is to even at all.
Yeah, it can naturally be.
Exactly, right? And it can't.
And so we have this, as a species, we have a natural limit that we should be at, that we have exceeded long ago.
So what point we come to is empathy is connected to that thread.
Absolutely, because look, man, I only have biological capacity to care about 150 people who are in our tribe.
Exactly.
But now, because of technology and communication and media, and because of the fact that I'm always pumped with information, now I have to be forced to care about more than 150 people.
I'm overwhelmed.
I'm totally overwhelmed.
I'm emotionally overwhelmed by too many people to be empathetic towards.
So it's very easy for me to now be like, well, you know what? Those people, fuck them.
I can't do it.
They're not part of my tribe.
You know what's a term? We're going to make it up right now. Empathetic fatigue. Okay, I just made it up. I'm calling
run out
this
of empathy stamina.
I've literally run out of empathetic stamina. I cannot.
I'm experiencing empathy fatigue.
That's it. I cannot support more care and concern. I cannot try on any more, than I'm trying on now. And so I think population is tied intrinsically to empathy.
Well, it's
now, I'm making that up, by the way. If anybody wants to challenge that, you're welcome.
I'm sure you're going to.
Please write in. Please write in to me so I can reply back to you with nothing, because I'm not going to get in a debate about this. But
I think that and I guess it always goes back to one of our old mantras, like, is that true or is that a story, right? Like, do I really have no more empathy for people? And this is, for a lot of the listeners that have been with the podcast for a long time, or they've been following your work or for a while, you do come across sometimes as a guy who doesn't give a fuck.
True.
Now,
even the logo says "given zero fucks" since 2001.
Right.
But I think people misinterpret what "give a fuck" means.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that you're not empathetic, because you're probably one of the most empathetic people are now.
I'm ultra
to your own fault.
To my own fault.
We've had this conversation. Yeah. For the people that know our backstory, is we've been
Friends for 20 years.
20
yeah,
years.
2 decades, yeah.
And there have been many conversations where I'm the one that says, Conch, you really shouldn't give a fuck about this person.
Yeah.
We've gotten in many arguments
True.
about you caring too much.
True.
Right? And
I get that from my mother. My mother's extremely empathetic. Extremely.
She's this uber Christian values
big
of
time.
Taking everybody in.
Hey, I grew up with Jesus as my superhero.
Yeah. Yes. And also, you had your community, your church or your parish. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah,
your
church,
church,
Catholic.
And that was your tribe.
Correct.
So you were very concerned about them.
But you were taught by that tribe. I was taught. We were taught that one of the greatest values you could have was to be empathetic. Jesus' general character, one of his top 5 qualities is empathy.
Yeah.
To care for another individual who like caring so many stories in the Bible are New Testament, specific stories about Jesus interacting with his disciples. Disciples are like, Jesus, what the fuck? Why do you care? And I'm embellishing a little bit of that, what the fuck? But let's just play. That's my version of Jesus. They're like, Matthew's like, Jesus, dude, what the fuck? You're not gonna give your money to that fucking poor guy. You're not gonna let that whore into the church. You're not gonna da da da. And Jesus always, whoa, dude, who the fuck are you, Matthew? You know what I mean? Like that. Those are the people that need us the most.
Yeah, listen, Matty.
Yeah, listen, Matty. Those are the people that it matters that we show up for. So I grew up with empathy, which again brings us back to the fact that it's not something necessarily ingrained in us as but something that we are actually taught as a social value and construct, because you can be taught to be unempathetic as well. But the fact that I was taught to be empathetic, and this is not to take us way off the page, but this is one of the reasons my mother argues for religion. Because me, most people know this about me. I'm atheist, so I don't believe in God. However, I do very much value some of the values.
Yeah, you share.
I share, and not only do I mean a tremendous amount of my person is made up of the values, of course, that I was taught, and empathy was one of them, and it was taught through the archetype of Christ. It was taught through that archetype, right? It could have been taught through Superman. It doesn't matter, but that's how I learned it.
Right.
So once I was able to then take that archetype and see it as exactly what it was, it's an archetype. It's not a real.
Yeah,
it's not fact.
It's a character.
It's a character. I mean, even if Jesus existed, it doesn't matter. The way that the book is using it is as moral.
Yeah, it's a tool for transmission
moral
of a
nutrition.
Right.
Correct. We're trying to give. So once you sort of let go of it needing to be fact and history, and now it can be a moral imperative.
It could be a fable that has a moral of the story.
Then
the moral of the story.
Perfect. Then you don't have to throw the empathy away with the other things that a lot of people will throw away because they had a bad experience with religion. They're like, oh man, fuck that. I hated being a Christian, so I'm going to throw away, all these values that might have come with it. Fortunately for me, I had a great experience, and I'm able to, and empathy was one of the things I was able to retain.
Right.
And taking us back to the fact that we just cannot maintain so much space in our hard drive for empathy for everyone in a day and age when we're socially connected to so many people, even if it's superficially.
Yeah.
We just are not learning this value anymore. But I'm sorry, but I want to say this. Yeah. That's why my mom feels so strongly about religion.
Right, because religion teaches that.
That teaches that, and
right.
she believes if you took religion away from society, you would also lose all of those important moral imperatives. And you know what? She's got an interesting point, I don't agree with her.
Right.
I see it differently
Right.
because I think you can still teach moral imperatives without all the voodoo, but it doesn't matter. She still feels she feels that they're intrinsically connected to the point where you cannot separate them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think visions like that are the visions that then breed the visions of either you're a Republican or a Democrat. And without these two, there's no politics. Or either you are, either you're a conservative or you're a liberal. And between, you cannot be a blend.
Oh, no.
Right? It's like,
there's no space for blend. Yeah, there's no place for it.
No, because what else is there?
Nothing.
Because here's the thing.
Give them a choice.
Green
Party.
And you know how much and you know how they get made fun of.
Yeah, they raised $1,000 this year.
Yeah.
It's like,
or libertarian.
Or libertarian. Yeah.
Which the one of their candidates said the first thing I'm going to do when I get elected is I'm going to shut down the government and then I'm going to fire myself. So I'm like, all right, let's take you guys. I was hoping to hear a new perspective.
Yeah, that's
and
not
now
it.
we got another fucking
it.
terrorist.
So
on the talk.
anarchy is the solution.
Is the solution.
Genius.
All right,
Okay.
great. So, but it's this thing when we grow up in these bubbles and you brought up your mom. You brought up Ginger to the equation. So let's just use it because she's such a wonderful person.
My mom is
that has
she's
the
amazing,
most pure and gorgeous of intentions.
Yes.
And then she still has this side which we always talk about, which is she's so pro hardcore religion. And
she's pro hardcore Jesus.
So not even hardcore religion.
Not religion, Jesus.
Jesus.
Because I want to represent her properly.
Right.
She's not even that connected to religion. She's connected to
Jesus.
She's pro Christian. She's pro Christian, and obviously, like all Christians, her version,
So,
which is always fascinating too
Right.
about Christians is, well, what about the going to hell thing for this and that? Well, I don't. I don't know. That's up to God. I personally, I have gay friends and I love them, and I would never judge them, and I don't think So
which one is it?
Yeah. You can't pick a side. No. Because it's
you still get to wear the jersey.
You get to wear the jersey, and it's confusing. It's like you love the team, but you hate the quarterback. You know what I mean, or whatever. No, it's true. It's so fascinating.
So what I wanted to talk about was, let's just kind of take the time machine back to when Ginger was growing up.
Okay.
And where she developed, because I think when we talk about, because the whole conversation started, what is the danger to our society if empathy goes away? Right? That's really the point of this conversation.
Okay,
it's
great.
not politics or anything.
That's the question
right?
on the table.
So if the question is, what happens to society if empathy goes away? Mm-hmm. So let's go back to what happened to society when Ginger was growing up. Where she grew up in this little bubble that was in small town back then, North Carolina, right? Raised in one church with one big influence, which was the pastor, I'm guessing, and with one big book of rules, which was the New Testament, and one superhero, which was Jesus, and one little group of activities, which is whatever the after-school program of the church was. So all of these things that were happening in this bubble formed in her neurology what normal and standard mean. Right? So nowadays, she could battle that her whole life. As reality in the world changes, her limbic system in her brain still considers all these sets of rules normal and standard. And everything that's outside of that, it's outside of that.
Well, she can't, in a way, it's like your grandmother trying to understand iPhone technology.
Right.
There's just something about the technology that's so foreign,
right?
That you because you can't apply the same rules that you apply in one social construct to another social construct and make it work perfectly.
Right. And now, can it be done? Can you learn? Can you apply yourself? Can your grandma learn to use an iPhone?
Yeah, you're going to have to make big adjustments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you want to.
Right.
And I think that that's the biggest issue that we have right now, that we don't want to because we're tired, you know? And because we're tired, that is a great excuse to not have empathy for others. But I challenge that we're honestly tired to not care for others. Because, last weekend I was talking to my good friend Riza, and she was telling me about this whole thing that's going on. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, and if you're not, look it up. It's super interesting. My friend lives in St. Pete, and St. Petersburg, Florida, has a tremendously big and influential in the scene, gay and lesbian and queer and all the different letters, like non-heterosexual. Every letter, and I'm scared I'm going to miss one because I love everybody. Community. And so it's a very progressive place, actually, for St. Pete, Florida. So you go there for Florida standards.
For sure. Right? No, it's considered one of the more, from what I understand.
She's coming from Fort Lauderdale and schooling me that I live in Miami Beach.
Right.
How to do this shit. So, and she tells me about this people that when they send you an email, because they don't identify in their gender and their sexuality is not heterosexual and standard male female, so that you don't struggle, they'll tell you. And the way that they say it is they put their name in the signature, and underneath they'll put my pronouns that I prefer are. So you call me she, and you use to describe my things her. Right? So she and her. So for example, she was talking about this influencer that she follows, that this person does not identify with male or female. So this person's pronoun, and I'm really doing my best right now to say this thing right. This person's pronouns are they and their. So, for example, when you talk about this person, you don't say he or she, you say they.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so they likes penis or vaginas?
Right.
Like I didn't know how to, right?
Well, it sounds to me like there's, first of all, maybe I'm old school, but my grammar, my recollection of grammar is that they
is for plural.
I was getting ready to say that they implies plural. Maybe am I wrong?
No, you were not wrong, but you're wrong now.
Okay, good.
Because they changed it.
Excellent.
So the Webster's Dictionary, which I guess is who rules the English language.
Okay.
They changed they to also include the singular.
Okay.
I just still don't know, and maybe someone can chime in, how I conjugate my verbs, because, man, I studied 17 years of English grammar. And you know that while I'm foring my grammar at some point.
I have empathy for the person trying to learn English in this modern era, where you're getting completely mind fucked trying to figure out how to use a pronoun now. Thing. Yeah, pronouns. Well, and for me, okay, go ahead.
So right now you get they could be used for a person, and in my gut reaction was like, why don't they just fuck off?
Right, sure.
And then she was like, well, but have you ever considered the struggle that they go through? And I'm like, when you mean they, you mean them or they, that one person? So that as soon as I get don't give me a little thread of humor that I can yank off. I'm going to hang you with that whole rope. Yeah. But anyways, it was just an interesting conversation. And I was like, man, I consider myself a pretty open-minded person, but my first inclination was to tell them to go to hell. And then I was like, look, tell them to go to hell, but tell me more. I'm interested. And do I agree? Do I not agree? I don't know. Like, the truth is that it's too soon for me to make up my mind. And how attached am I to not willing to change the rules of my language? How at the same time, I usually ask this question: how many people are we actually talking about? That's always a question that I come up with.
And let me insert this. This is the problem. This, with 150 maximum people in your tribe, if Bob changes his pronoun from he to she, I can handle that. And not that I can handle it emotionally. Emotionally, I handled it the minute he decided to change it. I'm not attached.
Right.
Because there's a difference between I'm attached to calling you male, female, Barbara, dog. I don't, right? Irrelevant. Whatever you want to be called. I literally and genuinely, sincerely don't have pushback, because I will accommodate whatever fantasy, whatever psychological trauma, whatever adjustment, whatever freedom, whatever breakthrough, whatever your shit is, I'll accommodate it. Really.
Like if I ask you, you'll help me out.
Absolutely. Cool. I don't care. And I don't care, again, what the basis of it is. Because for one person, it might be bullshit. And another person might be a deep, deep psychological wound that they're trying to heal through changing the way that they're referred to. Okay, got it. But I cannot do that for 8 billion people. And what I mean by that is there's 8 billion people on the planet. And if you just run the numbers on that, if people start to change their identification pronoun, and it becomes, it's tens, then it's hundreds, then it's thousands, then it's millions of people that I have to specifically remember which particular pronoun you're working with. I think anybody listening to this could understand that that's not manageable. It's not realistic. It's not even it's not that even there's anything wrong with it. It's not something that you can literally do.
So you're saying that the scenario in which 8 billion people require a different way to call them, that's an
impossible reality to live within.
Right.
However,
but that's not what's being asked.
However, right. If it's limited to the tribe of people I know,
you can come up with 150 ways.
I can handle that. Right. But again, you have to now here's where empathy plays a part. If I'm on the other side of this argument where I am the person who's struggling with identity and I'm looking to reassign that, I've got to have empathy for the person who's got to remember
what to call you,
what to call me, and that they have been habitually referring to a male as a male or a female as a she. It's not only going to take time. If this individual is exposed to a number of different individuals who require this, it's almost impossible to expect it to be successful. So all I can say to an individual out there who is changing
their pronoun,
their pronoun, you should have zero expectation on how successful that is. You want to do it, do it. You want to ask for people to honor it and respect it, do it. But don't expect people to do it well, to do it quickly, to do it even permanently. Right. But you can expect some people to get it, some people not. And if you're going to be attached to the outcome of that effort, you're going to suffer a fuckload, even more than you're suffering now with the struggle to be identified with the correct gender for you.
But I may be wrong on this, but I think that the real struggle, once again, is with the lack of empathy. Not with the fact that maybe people are going to get it wrong.
Right.
But with the fact that people won't even fucking give it a chance.
Well, and that's because that's where we are right now. Because the first thing your brain does
fuck it.
Is go, fuck that. I can't remember that. There's too much. I got too much shit going on for me to have to log which gender you've chosen for yourself.
Yeah, but what if it was your mom?
Well, you could do it.
No, for your mom you can't.
Well, not only can you do it because of the empathy,
right,
but you can also do it because of the proximity of the relationship.
Right.
She's in your life on a daily, and it's not going to be a great effort other than you getting over your desire for her to remain, identified as her former gender, that is going to be an obstacle for you. Otherwise, you should be able to just move through that like fucking, through rock, through water. It's just like, okay, boom, smooth. I'm just going to go.
The empathy conversation, I think it's very important right now because of all the hate and the intolerance that we're making normal. So I want to bring it back.
You want to talk about Me Too?
I want to talk about all of that. I want to talk about.
I'm sorry. You know how much.
I know how
campaign.
big of a fan of you are.
I'm not. You know what it is? I want to say this. I'm not a fan of Me Too, any more than I'm a fan of Black Lives Matter, any more than I'm not a fan of this sort of what I guess the right term would be horde mentality.
Yeah, like mob mentality.
Mob mentality. I just don't dig it because I think it creates a lack of empathy for the other side.
Right.
Great example is how much of the Me Too campaign has introduced education and reform for young men who, in all sincerity, would benefit from understanding how to treat people better, male, female. Because, by the way, the same guy that's intolerant, I guarantee you, same guy who's calling, who's whistling at a chick and going, "Hey, what's up, nice ass," is looking at a gay guy going, "What's up, faggot?" Same guy.
It's just a guy who's not empathetic.
That's that guy, exactly. It's not,
Right. So it boils down to lack of empathy, and in this lack of empathy, there's a business behind it.
For sure.
And because when we look at social media, and I feel like the thing is that lack of empathy is not a new thing. The thing is that right now, we're making money because of lack of empathy. Now, we are not, but companies are making money because of it. Because if you look at, I was listening to a really cool podcast the other day called Collective Insights, which is by the Neurohacker Collective, really fascinating neuroscience and social impact on technology conversations. Super deep, nerdy, crazy stuff. And there's a guy called Tristan Harris that was talking about artificial intelligence and how it's applied to the social media algorithms. And what was really interesting to me is that he was talking about how we're super scared of artificial intelligence becoming this runaway technology where we build a robot that's supposed to clean your house and then it becomes smart enough to steal your wife and fucking whatever. Right. So
because it also wants to suffer.
It also wants to be human, right?
Yeah.
So what he was talking about was that actually the artificial intelligence that's running Facebook to populate your feed is already runaway AI. So what's really interesting is that when you log into your Facebook or your social media profiles, you see something different than what I see. Mm-hmm. And this is something that a lot of people don't take into consideration, that Facebook is not the same for everybody. It's actually very, very different for every person, because Facebook is invested in keeping you in Facebook or YouTube, keep you in YouTube, or Instagram.
Well, fuck, Netflix does the same thing.
Right. So there's a movie after
it's an
the other.
echo chamber.
They want you to stay in it.
Right.
Because while you're in it, they're logging your time.
Yeah.
The more time you spend on it, the more valuable you become to advertisers.
Right.
So they don't care. They really honestly don't care because they haven't found a way to program ethics into artificial intelligence.
Well, no, and
right?
I don't know if it's the owner, if it's the founder of Netflix, was asked the question, "What's your greatest competition right now?" And he said, "Sleep."
Genius, right?
Right.
So they want you to stay watching because the more time you spend there, the more valuable you are to advertisers, and that's actually what they sell. They sell advertisers. So they sell advertisement. Well, what they sell is not advertisement. What they sell is your time, your attention to advertisers. Yeah. So what their algorithm does is it figures out what's the best thing that I can put on Concho's feed to keep him watching. So, for example, I know you. So if I'm going to be the algorithm,
so you know you're going to put on Stranger Things.
I'm going to put on Stranger Things
because you know I love Stranger Things.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay. Yes.
Somebody talking shit about Trump.
Big butts.
Skinny girls with big butts.
Okay.
And
listen, my wife is going to be laughing at this because honestly,
skinny fit.
Because honestly, I'm probably one of the few guys out there that actually lives on Instagram who does not use it for butts because it's the most insane thing I've ever heard. Which we'll get into that at another time. So they keep putting in there whatever's going to keep you there. Yeah.
Right? So here's the thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, it looks at what my interests are,
What your interests are.
and then it keeps feeding me my
Feeding you the
interests.
stuff that you like, so you
Right.
keep watching.
Okay.
It's like the TV that you never want to put away because the program is always your
It's-
favorite
oh, yeah, I
program.
can't wait.
It's always a
Exactly.
favorite show. So
Okay.
the thing is that they keep playing your favorite show.
Right.
So if you are one bigoted, intolerant motherfucker,
Dukes of Hazzard.
they're going to keep playing whatever is going to reflect to that.
Right.
What's the problem with that is that you're going to think that that's what everybody watches. And you're going to think that that's normal.
Well, you're certainly
And
going
then-
to, yeah, okay.
And then
yeah.
when someone comes around thinking a different way, you're going to be like, what the fuck is wrong with this person?
Right.
And you're going to push back because you've never been given any other perspective other than what you already like.
Well,
your echo chamber.
Fair enough. You're going to be well, one thing that's really brilliant about the Facebook construct is it sends you to opinion pieces, which actually take a subject that you might be on the fence about, and it is going to present you with the argument for the side that it, of course, it has identified you on.
That it believes you're going to be
Right,
siding with.
and then it's going to feed you more and more and more of that. The reality is that all news has become, well, I say all, that's not an accurate statement. Most news has become opinion.
Yes.
And so we don't know, the typical person doesn't know how to distinguish they don't know how to distinguish between what is an opinion piece and what is a factual news piece, because it's hard, because it's hard.
It's impossible right
It's
now.
impossible to see that for the average person. You don't know what sources to get it from, and these sources, bringing it back to empathy, these sources are not looking for empathetic pieces. They're looking for pieces that polarize, because the polarized piece is more interesting and it gets more traction and it trends. You don't get trending
Thinking.
you don't get trending pieces typically in the news cycle from feel good, from things that say, hey guys, why don't we all get along and look at both sides? That's just not fucking interesting. People don't want it. They want what they want, as you said, the echo of what they already believe.
They want to believe they're right.
Right. So,
because don't we all want to be validated? Like at the end of the
absolutely.
day, don't we all deep inside want to go to sleep knowing that we're not fucked up?
Bro, I got an Instagram message. I posted something that basically was Donald Trump had said, and again, guys, if you're a Republican out there, don't be pissed off. Donald Trump's a shit president, and you know it. Don't be upset at me about it. Because, and listen, if Hillary was the president, I think she's shit too. So I'm going to be very honest with you. I think that if she had been elected president as a Democrat, I think she would also be her own version of shit. I'm not a fan.
Look, she
okay?
was so bad that Trump won.
Well, exactly.
That should tell you
Yeah,
something.
there you go. But the point is this: don't be pissed off, because neither one of these guys they're not on your team. So just wake the fuck up. If you're like, I'm offended by this, Trump's not on your team. Trump doesn't give a fuck about you. Trump and Hillary doesn't give a fuck about you either.
He's not empathetic.
He's not empathetic. This is a bottom line. And if you can't see he's not empathetic, you're on fucking crack. Okay, so just put the podcast down now and just go away. So it's all good, because my sponsors, I don't have any. So see, you can't fuck me. So anyway, going back to the fact that I posted this news article that Trump has just recently said that these 4 congresswomen should go back to the countries which they came from, and they should fix the shitholes. He did not say shithole, by the way. They should fix these countries that are obviously crime-ridden, and they have their own problems. They should go back and fix those instead of worrying about instead of being so focused on the issues within our country. But the irony, the massive irony of his statement is that 3 of the congresswomen were born in the United States. Yeah. Only one of them was actually not from the U.S. So his statement was so inaccurate, it was so inflammatory, and it was so absurd that the president of the United States would say this about 4 politicians, 4 colleagues, 4 Congress people, that they go back to their own countries, and they're born in the goddamn U.S. They are from this country. It just reinforces the idiocy of this individual. And if you can stand and actually, in any way, shape, or form, try to make excuses for that kind of intolerance and ignorance, you have to just simply be associated to it. You have to actually be not just a part of it. You have to actually be in alignment with it, because it doesn't. You don't have to be a Republican to agree with that with that kind of inaccuracy. It's just inaccurate, and it's in contrast to the kind of values that any of us should hope for from our president. Okay? Bottom line. Now, but again, I don't care if he's Republican. I don't care if he's a Democrat. I don't care what party he would be from.
Yeah, you'd like your president to be accurate.
I like my president to be
at
accurate.
Least check before he opens
Jesus
his mouth.
Christ. I mean, it's absurd. Okay, now, with that said, I post it, and then I get from this guy an immediate response. Bro, he says, stay out of politics. I want to see from you pieces about BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and mobility, movement. I don't want to hear all about politics.
So, that's pretty intolerant of him.
Well, so my first response is, brother, because you know what? Here's my thing. I'm actually practicing empathy. So I write him back and say, brother, listen, you want to tell me that, and he says in this, you're going to lose half your audience, or you're going to alienate half your audience. I say, brother, you know who my audience is? Question mark. You know I'm going to lose half my audience. You are bothered by, you feel half my audience is bothered by my post. I said, but what's interesting here is you don't know any of this. It's just how you personally feel. It's your personal reaction from the post. And now you're trying to project it onto to 50% of my followers as if they feel that way too.
Yeah, guys does empathy.
Yeah, disguised as empathy. And I said, and first of all, he wrote back. The first thing he wrote was, "Wow, I can't believe you're responding to me." I respond to people all the time, constantly, and a lot of people are critical of that. A lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people say, "Man, why do you waste time in these debates? Why do you waste time responding to people?" Because that is how you get deep penetration into your markets. You penetrate the noise of all the typical people out there by doing shit that the typical people don't do.
Right.
Yeah, I don't expect lots of people to respond to you. Sure, but I do. And that's what makes me different. And that's what makes, when people follow me, they realize that they're following somebody who is actually interacting with them and invested, and somebody who they can actually identify with as a human being. I'm not just a person selling shit out there for them to consume who doesn't care or have any interaction with them. So that's the way I penetrate. I go in and I penetrate the noise, the static of the typical person out there trying to be heard by doing something that the typical person trying to be heard doesn't do. At my level, you can be a new person with 300 followers and be like typing to everybody. But when you get up there and you've got thousands of followers and you've got your blue tick and you've been around the scene for, coming up on 2.5, 3 decades, and you're a pioneer in an industry, you've got a voice. And most people don't feel you're accessible anymore. But I'm very accessible. And I actually like that about me. And I'm not going to change that because I don't have the quote unquote time to be accessible. Right. Sure I do. And I find those moments where I can be empathetic with a person on Instagram. And I was empathetic with this guy, and we had a full conversation, and we both walked away because he was clearly a Republican. Right. He told me he was, right. and I'm clearly nothing. I don't know what the fuck I am, but I'm clearly not identified as something.
You're fluid.
I'm fluid, but he's fixed. But he wasn't so fixed that he couldn't hear me. And I wasn't so fluid that I didn't have positions that I could understand he felt strongly about. Yeah. And we had a great fucking conversation, and we kissed and made up.
And now you're dating.
And now we're in a relationship.
That's
Okay, yeah.
beautiful. What I wanted to add
It's
to
called
that
empathy.
was that, and I believe that that's probably most people. That most people are willing to listen, and most people are willing to have a conversation, and that if you respond, they'll be appreciative if they started the conversation with the intention of having a conversation.
Fair enough.
Instead of just like trolling and talking shit and being like, bleh. But instead, if I do, and this is a belief, because I just haven't measured every person.
You're making this up.
I'm making
Yeah.
this up.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I, in my head, live in this reality where I do believe that most people are not inflammatory assholes that just want to be right. However, I do realize that that is what the social media platforms thrive on.
Agreed.
And that's where the attention goes.
That's the loudest voice.
And that's where the money is.
Yes.
What my concern is that then there's a whole new generation of people growing up, like when your mom grew up in the church thinking that was normal. Now we have people that instead of going to church and thinking that's normal, they go to Instagram and think that's normal. And then if we continue to be intolerant at such a large scale, now we're breeding this generation of intolerant little shits.
Well, they're intolerant because they get empathetic fatigue on social media. They're just like, why do I look at these fucking people and what they're saying? I don't have time for it. Like you can read 2 inches of a thread and be like, Jesus, I'm out of here.
Right.
This is absurd.
So you know that you just don't want to do it.
So you start to have a certain type of emotional callus developed.
Yeah.
And you just shut down empathy, because empathy at some point no longer actually serves you in at least in that. In other words, social media, guys, here's the reality. Social media is not designed for empathy. Matter of fact, it's a fucking horrible place to even try to practice empathy, because if you go onto social media as an empathetic individual, you're gonna find the fatigue hits you. Either it's gonna hit you at a month, a week, a year, 4 years, but at some point you're gonna be like, I cannot take any longer
Other people's pain.
other people's
struggle.
But the way it's expressed is hate, anger,
Polarization.
nasty statements, criticism that is designed to destroy your person, not just to destroy a position,
It's
but
violent.
it's violent to make you feel less than as a human being. That's how we're communicating now. And so you spend any period of time on social media, it will your emotional threshold, your empathetic threshold, excuse me,
Let's make that
will
one up.
be diminished quickly. And so you have to be so tough. You have to be so tough. And people get mad at me too, because sometimes I tell people to fuck off, and people are like, man, you're so not empathetic. And I'm like, listen, man, here's a reality check. If you come at me with some type of hostile, and I don't want to call it an intention,
But an attack.
but if you attack me, why would you be surprised? And people are, this is what's shocking to me, people are surprised when I tell them to fuck off. People, and it happens almost every time. I will tell a person to fuck off when they say something derogatory. Like I remember somebody said to me one time, you're basically making an argument for murder. You're basically supporting murder, by this statement. They were basically in a very, very direct way saying, you are supporting murder. You are in essence, a murderer by default, okay, by association. And I just said to this guy, "Hey, dude, fuck off." That I have nothing to say to you. I have no interest in, because that's not a conversation starter.
Versus like, so, because if the guy said, let me see if I understand you. So are you in support of murder?
Right.
That's different
right.
than you're a fucking murderer.
Yeah, it's not a question. So yeah, it was not framed as a question. It was framed as a statement. And then the statement was then the implication is that is who you are or who you're being.
And he was projecting a character judgment onto you.
Absolutely.
He was like, you're a piece of shit, murderer.
Right. And so a lot of people somebody will jump on social media and go, man, why didn't you be empathetic with that guy? And it's like, dude,
I tried.
My empathetic threshold was finished for the day. Okay, do you have my social media account? Do you deal with the amount of douchebaggery I deal with on a daily, on an hourly basis, with the amount of people responding to my controversial statements? Because if I take a position, you can guarantee I'm going to hear the opposite position, but instead of it being from someone saying it kindly and nicely and posing it as a conversation as a statement to start a conversation, it's going to be an assault on me and my statement. And then I'm thinking, why the fuck are you following me then? Because they don't unfollow me. They just write some bullshit and they keep following me. And so I've got to be empathetic with this individual, which is an important tool for me to practice, but I'll just be very straightforward. I just run out of empathy.
Yeah. And there's a difference between empathy and allowing abuse. Right?
Absolutely.
Because there's, you can understand the dog that nips you every now and then, but when the dog starts biting everybody, you got to put that shit down.
Well,
or you got to do something about it.
And
you know what I mean?
True. True. And the thing is with social media, if you don't spend a lot of time, two people. A, you don't spend a lot of time on social media. Or B, you're not well known. You have no you're not a public persona. Yeah. So you don't deal with at all. You have no empathy for what I have to go through.
Right.
I've had people say, I'm so disappointed in your response to that individual. And I'm just like, I just so don't give a fuck what you think. And I don't because at the end of the day, you're just another person projecting onto me your disappointment, and you'll just go find another person to be disappointed about. Yeah, I'm just one of the many people you're disappointed by today.
Well, I guess this is one of the reasons why, and many times you've asked me or you've suggested that I would be more active or try to grow. It's like, hey, you have all the necessary things to be a lot more popular in our industry, and honestly, I'm not ready to take that responsibility, because that's the thing. I feel that if I'm going to put shit out there, and I know that my empathetic threshold is low, then I'm not even going to go there. Like, that's the thing. If I'm going to start a fire, I don't want to start a fire that I'm not willing to be burned by.
Yeah.
So when somebody takes that attitude of posting things that are polarizing or that are provocative, then I feel that, and this is an opinion, this doesn't have to be a fact, that there's also a certain degree of empathy that you got to have for the other people that are going to bash it, because who knows what they're going through, and they think that taking it out on you is going to make them feel right today. And all the work that comes with. It's kind of like with the conversation that we were having a little earlier, where I was like, before you sign that deal, make sure that you know everything that's in it.
Well, one of the challenges is with social media is that you don't, again, have the time to have a full debate with every single person.
But the platform's not designed for that.
Exactly. Well, in a way, let me push back a little bit on that. In a way, it is designed for that, because that's what keeps you on it. It likes reply to reply to reply to reply.
It makes you way more popular. If your threads have replies within replies, you get displayed more often, and you get shown to people that don't follow you. Because that's the other thing. I don't have to follow you to have you in my feed. Because when I go to search, everybody shows up. As soon as you hit search, let's say that right now you tell me about this thing. And I'm like, okay, let me search first. So I go to search and I start typing whatever. There's a bunch of other things already there before I even type anything. And I challenge you guys to go to your social media right now, whatever platform you're in. Instagram is the one we're talking about. But if you hit search, there's already results there. And what are those results about? If you go to mine, you know that I like vintage cars and vintage motorcycles. You hit search on my thing, and it's all vintage cars and motorcycles and ass.
Well, it's no doubt it's custom.
Yeah, it's custom.
It's all custom.
And it
now,
also relates to your demographic and to your age, right? And to your gender.
Well, obviously it gathers our search results and then it boop and it creates a profile.
So, for example, if I'm a yogi that also replies on a bunch of shit and has a political opinion and don't follow you, you're going to show up in their search. You're going to show up because you match their profile.
Yeah, the
so
criteria.
we're going to be fed. This is a very dangerous TV that we have in our pocket now. Because back then we could control one channel at a time. Right now it's everything that you don't want that gets pushed onto you. And what the problem with that is that it is done for the purpose of grabbing your attention and keeping you hooked. Keeping you hooked. And kids are growing up with thinking that this is normal.
Well, and this is the thing. A lot of the reason I don't engage is because I refuse to participate. Because I know that statement then draws me into a conversation, and then it's this public conversation that everybody can read and get behind and like, oh yeah, this person tells me to fuck off and like 6 people like that. And then I tell this person to fuck off and 7 people like that. You know what? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I do it sometimes and sometimes I don't, but it's like, I know that when it tries to pull me into that, it's trying to get me enrolled in the game.
Machine. Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, a lot of this is about the empathy required. Sometimes I think it's empathetic to just not respond.
Absolutely.
You know, there's an empathy. So
yeah, because you're like, he didn't mean that.
Yeah, you know what?
Hey, he didn't mean it.
Or smiley face, you know, and that's my empathy for the day. It's just, you know what? Smiley face back to you, because the truth is, you know what I know about you? I know you wouldn't say that to my face. See, I know that. I know you wouldn't walk up to me and stand in front of me and say some shit like that, because you would take one look at me in real life and you'd be like, this guy might just punch the fuck out of me. This guy might just choke the shit. Like, because you would think that, because you know what? I would think that about anybody else too. I would not walk up to a person, even if I thought I was physically more, capable than them. I would not walk up to them and say something that is aggressive, that would provoke aggression or anger, even take the risk of that. The things that people say to a person, just as somebody says on social media, you're a douchebag or you're ugly. For you to walk up to a person at a party or in a public place and go, hey, you're a douchebag,
like, okay.
You're ugly. What, dude? You're one step away from an assault charge, but that's a fist fight. It's just like, you're crazy.
You know
and
what's
one would do
interesting is
it.
that, did you grow up in fist fights?
Of course I did.
Kids don't.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So right now, kids are not allowed to get in fist fights, and there's probably a good reason for that. I'm not against it. Yeah. The problem is
I'm against it, but yeah.
I'm against it too. But I'm just trying to move the conversation along. But there's kids growing up thinking that style of communication is okay. And also, then they get to say it, and they don't get punched in the face.
Right. So empathy is lost.
Empathy is lost in the new protocol of communication,
right,
and in the new norms of society, where somebody getting their ass handed to them for the right reason is no longer allowed.
We can't. Right. We can't even be empathetic for that.
Well, because of course, it's like, where's the line drawn? Like, there were enough people that beat people up for the wrong reason. Right. So now nobody is allowed to punch people in the face when they say something crazy, right, because some guy got punched in the face for the wrong reason. Right. And I get it, because that's kind of how we regulate to the lowest common denominator. True. Instead of trying to instead of raise the bar of society, we just keep lowering and making us dumber.
True.
So these kids are growing up thinking that style of communication is normal. These kids are growing up believing that you're either in or out of any opinion, meaning you're either Republican or a thing. You're either pro gender neutrality or you are heterosexual or go to hell.
You're abortion, or you're pro-life, or you're pro-choice.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground.
There's no in the middle.
Yeah, there's no place to be.
There's no in the middle, because middle grounds don't sell. So middle ground, I'm sure there's plenty of middle ground opinions. Like, if you go to look them up, I'm sure they're there. It's just that they don't show up at the top of Google, and they don't show up as an automatic suggestion for, hey, next video.
They don't trend.
I know that you just
they don't trend. You
I know
can't
that
trend.
you just watched a movie about one-sided shit.
Yeah.
But next, watch this thing that may change your opinion. No, this is not how it works. So this kid's going to grow up thinking that all of this is normal. And look, before we go too invested, because I feel like this is a trap also. Let's not get too invested of what happens when we're not empathetic for the Me Too's, or we're not empathetic for the pronouns, or we're not empathetic for global warming, or for the never again, or for the Black Lives Matter, or for the whatever. Let's not even think of that. But if you want to be in a relationship with a person, you're going to have to be empathetic.
It's called being married.
Right?
It's called having children. It's called working for having
say,
employees.
Let's not say being married, because some people are not pro-marriage.
Well, I'm sorry.
Whatever.
You know what I mean? Being
having a friend,
an intimate, long-term relationship.
How about this? I don't know of anyone who doesn't want to have a friend.
Right.
Is that fair? I'm sure there's one fucking weirdo out there that doesn't, right? And I'm going to be.
Well, that weirdo's probably watching our show, and will definitely write me something. Yes.
If you, I don't care if you want to be married, or if you want to have children, or if you want to be political, or if you don't, or if you want to be whatever. But let's say that you want to have a friend, right? How many times you had to be empathetic with me? I was saying something crazy and offensive, and you had to look at me and be like, "These fuckers probably going through something, so I'm not going to punch them in the teeth." Mm-hmm. We've had to.
Oh, well, of course.
But that's what friendships get built on. So
for sure.
So, here's my biggest concern for society without empathy, is that it lacks the ability for people to have relationships, let alone support or be against your team or your movement. Like, that's not important if you can't have a friend. That doesn't matter when you can't maintain. When you can maintain.
You can't maintain the relationship it suggests you're relating to something.
Yeah.
The very construct of the term is to relate.
Right.
And if you can't relate to this other individual's situation, what they might be going through that day, what they might be experiencing, there's no way you're going to be able to create balance when balance is disturbed.
Exactly.
And that's the thing about maintaining relationships. It's just a constant reestablishment of harmony, of balance, because there's these moments where we're getting along perfectly, and then you want tacos and I want Greek food, but that's fine, except that I'm not even hearing you, and I'm so fucking into the Greek food that I'm being a dick about it. And it's like, man, he really needs some Greek food tonight. And it's like, you know what? There's a time in my life I also needed Greek food. And so let's get Greek food. And then balance is restored. But it could be it could be the end of our friendship.
And is that what we're going to hang our friendship over? Greek food.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
So that's
what's
the thing.
being right.
It's being right.
Absolutely.
It's being righteous, And I think the biggest danger to a society without empathy is a society in which the only relationship that is possible is your relationship as a consumer. Because companies will only sell you the shit that you want to buy.
Well, the customer's always right.
Right? Isn't that a beautiful thing? Yeah. Right? So the customer's always right.
So you always get to be right.
So you always get to be right. And wonder why we're more and more consumerism. Why consumerism is on the rise. And that's because every time you buy something, you get to be right.
And by the way, guys, that's a fucking lie. You're not always right. Lots of times you're wrong.
No, let me ask you this. Yeah. Does any iPhone 25, whatever the fucking latest one, are you guys excited about the new plug that you got to buy so that you can...
Right.
No. Yeah. No one ever said, Steve, give me a plug that will obsolete all of my headphones.
And
please.
Please make me have to repurchase, adapters.
Right.
No. Well, and here's one of the things. Well, Steve Jobs was never one of those guys who was a fan of the concept of pleasing the customer. He actually felt that that the customer didn't know what it wanted, and that it was his position that you told the customer what they wanted, and actually I think that's a far I lean far more on that side than I do on this side of the customer is always right.
Well, and I guess that's okay depending on what industry you're in.
Fair enough.
Because if you're in public opinion, that's a fucked up place to have that attitude.
Yeah.
But that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Because right now, there's two opinions that you're allowed to have. You're either on this team or on this team. Yeah. And they just create those two opinions. And then the machines that are used to propagate these opinions are also programmed to continue to propagate those two, to create what you call, and I think it's a genius term, those echo chambers. Yeah. So that everyone's right and everyone's right and everyone's right. And it's dangerous, man. But it's going to boil down to, do you want to, and if we want to ask, the audience, like, do you want to have friends? Do you want to be able to have meaningful relationships?
Yeah. Do you want to be in a long-term friendship, in a long-term intimate relationship, in a long-term position with a great company, with a great craft
community,
a great community? Well, you're going to have to learn to get out from behind that fucking computer, out from behind that phone, that device, and you're going to have to learn to actually relate to people and use this very interesting thing called empathy, which is to see yourself in their shoes and them in yours, so that you can learn to problem solve together. Because relationship is nothing but problem solving. It's sharing good times and problem solving the times that aren't.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Which are a lot.
Which are a lot.
Right.
The lion's share of the relationship is going to be navigating, what you want versus what I want, and making that work.
Yeah, and hopefully the values.
But how can I even give you what you want if I can't understand why you want it?
And the only way is for you to be empathetic.
That's it. Right. And that brings us to a wrap. I think that really puts the entire thing in perspective, guys. Is that empathy at the end of the day is the secret sauce. It's the formula. It's not the formula. It is the ingredient. Probably the most important ingredient to the formula of being a successful person in the world. And I'm not talking about financial success. That's just one variation of success.
Like happiness.
I'm talking about success in happiness. Right. Success as a human being is to be able to look at another human being and try on what they're going through and learn to be someone who can listen and see yourself as being some variation or version of them at some point, some time, some place, and recognize that by doing that, you become the embodiment of wisdom, not the embodiment of knowledge, not the embodiment of information, but the embodiment of wisdom, which is to know, like a grandmother, like a grandfather, to know, I've been there. I've seen that. I know what that's like. Just be patient with him. Be patient with her. They'll grow up. They'll make the changes. They'll learn. Those are the things that you hear from wisdom, from our wisdom elders. Be patient. Give them time. Have you ever asked them this question?
Yeah,
you ever thought about it this way? You ever seen it from this perspective? These are the things you hear from a grandparent, from an elder. We don't, and our elders, again, they're not valued much anymore. But those are the people who've had enough time to see that what they thought was right has changed so many times, and that the only thing they know is that they don't know anything. That everything is, that's, that classic Socrates, that arriving at this place where you can see that this is all just practice over and over again of certain perspectives, certain ideas, certain beliefs. You're just practicing them on each other, and then you change it, You practice a different one. You know, you practice like being a vegetarian. You practice that for a while. And you practice all the things that come with it. And then you practice being a different variation of that. And then you practice all the things that come with it. We're just practicing characters and archetypes and belief systems. And empathy is crucial to that practice. Without empathy, we just can't let each other practice figuring out who the fuck we are. I mean, and I don't even know if there is a place you arrive to that is who I am. But there's certainly an understanding that you may eventually arrive to, which is that there's no real place to arrive to, that this is just a process, and I'm in it until the day I die. So empathy, crucial, powerful, necessary.
I think it's going to be a very personal value first, before we can be empathetic for all these groups and all these causes, which is what we're really failing at doing. It's maybe practicing on our tribe, those 150 people. Are we really empathetic? Are you empathetic with your parents? Are you empathetic with your friends? Are you empathetic with your partner, with your kids, with your coworkers? Like, are you really empathetic with your circle of concern?
And hopefully that circle is a variety of different perspectives.
Right.
Not
just an echo chamber that's just going to repeat the thing you said.
Because it doesn't take empathy.
No, it doesn't take any effort for that.
No effort.
So once you can do that honestly, then we can transmute that wisdom into these more esoterical and just beyond our Homo sapien capacity to care for that external group, which I believe that because we have the technology to be informed of it, we also maybe want to take on the role of, let's try it out. I'm not saying you're responsible for it, but hey, I heard about this cause. Let's find out if you're compelled to. But we're not even cleaning up our own personal thing. And if, that Spanish saying that if everyone cleans their sidewalk, the whole street is always clean. So I think that if we're all working on our personal empathy, then it'll be much easier. Like, get the muscle of empathy on the people that really matter to you, real close, and practice. And then take on these challenges of people who you have nothing in common with, which is what we're being asked to do right now. And that's why we're losing our empathetic stamina. We're getting that empathy burnout, because now we're asked by society through social media to be empathetic to these groups that 2 days ago I didn't even know they were a thing. I didn't even know a person like that existed.
Nor do I feel any particular relationship with them. I don't have to be empathetic for this individual because I don't know them.
I don't know enough about their struggle.
I'm not related to them. I don't know their struggle. I don't agree with their perspective. And if they're not a great communicator, I don't even like them. They're not likable. So you've got all the reasons in the world not to be empathetic with someone on social media, someone on the other side of a political debate, someone who isn't, directly related to you. You've got all the reasons in the world not to be empathetic with that individual. However, that is your greatest opportunity to exercise the muscle that is empathy, which is to be empathetic with a person that at the end of the day would be the soldier on the other side of the battlefield, who's fighting just as fiercely as you are for what they believe in, who's also believing they're doing this for their family and their country and their freedoms. And as difficult as that is, holding space for that. And that doesn't mean we have to be a doormat. We don't have to be someone who can just, step all over us, who can communicate with us violently and disrespectfully. without us, being direct and disagreeable. I do think that being disagreeable is a very important quality, because if you're too agreeable, you just yesing and accepting. But disagreeable means I don't have to agree with you to have empathy for you. I don't have to agree with you to be nice to you. I don't have to agree with you to understand where you're coming from. I don't have to agree with you to be any of those things. But if I can disagree with you and understand where you're coming from, I can learn to love you as I love myself. Maybe that's just the simple answer.
And how many of our good friends or our good clients or our good colleagues that now we have grown to appreciate, we didn't like at the beginning. But because we were empathetic, or we just at least put up with it.
Well, I think about how much I didn't like you. And now I have to deal with you every day. Jeez Louise.
So remember how much you didn't like me.
So that's how we wrap it up right there.
Yeah.
That was just perfect. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Empathy. Maybe we'll entitle this one empathy fatigue, empathy threshold, empathy burnout.
Yeah. Hashtag I'm done.
Hashtag I'm done giving a fuck. So anyway, that was it for today, guys. Thank you for joining us for our first podcast together, The Guru Killer, with myself, Cameron, and my brother Donato. And we look forward to having you on this journey with us for the rest of the lifespan of this podcast. And I hope it's a long one. So love you guys. Take care.